Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to this YouTube video. Today we're going to be talking about a very fun topic. Steve here from the Curious Kairos and we had a debate recently with Chris Date and James Harding over on Trinity Radio. If you missed that, you might want to go check out that debate now and then come back and hang out with us. But Chris and James, since the debate, have put out about 5 hours of content responding to the debate and giving their thoughts on it. And Steve and we haven't had a chance to respond, and we haven't put any of our thoughts out there about the debate. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about one specific topic, and the plan is actually to make a series of videos responding to their thoughts and, their points in the debate. And so this isn't going to be an exhaustive video. We're just going to really dive into one specific topic, which is going to be punishment before the second coming of Jesus. And Steve, do you have any thoughts as well on that?
No, let's get down to it.
All right, so we're going to play a clip from James and Chris. They actually, like I said, they've put out about 5 hours of content responding to the debate. And so this is one of the points that they said, and this is what we're going to respond to in this video.
So take the theme of judgment, for example. In Scripture, punishment follows a just judgment wherein someone is found guilty. But in our opponent's view, it seems that the lost who go into Hades dead begin their punishment thousands of years, in some cases, before the judgment.
So their claim is basically that, on our view, that judgment begins thousands and thousands of years ago. But in the Bible, there is no judgment before the second coming of Jesus. So, Steve, do you think that that's an accurate description of what the Bible says, that there's no judgment or punishment whatsoever before the second coming of Jesus?
No, it's definitely not accurate. There's nothing that says no punishment is suffered by the ungodly before Judgment Day. And then also there's cases throughout the Bible where the ungodly do suffer punishment.
Yeah, I think that that's exactly right. You've got the flood, you've got when David loses his child after he sinned with Bathsheba and Uriah, you've got all kinds of punishments before the second coming of Jesus. But what's even more important, I think, to note too, as we did in the debate, is we think that their hermeneutic is backwards here, right? So in our view, we think that we're taking what are called the didactic teachings of the New Testament. So didactic just means like a teaching passage. And so a didactic teaching on the intermediate state, on what happens after we die, we take those passages and then we interpret the rest of the Bible in light of those teachings. But we think what they're doing is they're taking poetic passages like Ecclesiastes and Psalms, and they are reading the rest of the Bible in light of their interpretation of those verses. And so we basically think they should literally reverse what they're doing, because if they were, why would you interpret a didactic and more clear, or a didactic, more clear teaching in light of a poetic teaching? It just seems to be the reverse order of what you should be doing.
Yeah. And I want to correct something that I said in the debate. I said that, we shouldn't interpret the Old Testament with the New Testament or something like that. But that's not consistent with the rules in my book. What I should have said is we don't interpret poetry, we don't interpret the didactic teachings of Jesus and the apostles with poetry, whether it's in the Old Testament, New Testament. We should approach prophecy, prophetic dreams and visions, and poetry in the same way. And they're inherently, they inherently require an interpretation, and that interpretation must come from God. And so since the Holy Spirit inspired the writings of the New Testament and the didactic teachings within them, that's what we appeal to, is the didactic teachings or the doctrinal teachings by Jesus and the apostles, to interpret the metaphors within poetry, wisdom literature, and prophecy.
Yeah, and I think that that's probably the key part of the debate, and that's probably the key part of our argument, is when we are arguing for punishment in the intermediate state, which is what this video is about. We are using didactic teachings like 2 Peter and Jude, and we are understanding it in light of the Second Temple period's understanding of the afterlife, which they're using imagery from First Enoch, which we will show you guys in this video in just a minute. And we're taking those verses and saying, okay, this is what the New Testament is telling us the intermediate state is like. And so whatever else the Bible says about death and all these other things, they need to be understood in light of that. And so we think that our opponents are just, that they're making a mistake, and what we believe doing the opposite. They're taking Ecclesiastes, Psalms, these poetic passages, and trying to understand the didactic teachings in light of that. Do you want to demonstrate what we're talking about? Should we pull up 2 Peter and kind of show what we mean?
Yes, that sounds good.
All right. All right. So this is 2 Peter. Peter makes an argument from verse 4 all the way to verse 9, I believe. And so, Steve, if you want to, go through this and walk through our argument, take it away.
All right. So we start with verse 4, but verses 4 through 9 connect. So basically, the thought begins in verse 4, and then the thought concludes in verse 9. So I'll read the whole passage, and then I'll reread it, just connecting 4 to verse 9. For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to pits of darkness, held for judgment, and did not spare the ancient world, but protected Noah, a preacher of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly. And if he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to destruction by reducing them to ashes, having made them an example of what is coming for the ungodly. And if he rescued righteous Lot, who was oppressed by the perverted conduct of unscrupulous people, for by what he saw and heard that righteous man, while living among them, felt his righteous soul tormented day after day by their lawless deeds. Then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from a trial, and to keep the unrighteous under punishment for the day of judgment. So I want to read that again, just connecting verses 4 and 9. For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to pits of darkness and held them for judgment, then, so here's the conclusion, then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from a trial, and to keep the unrighteous under punishment for the day of judgment. And so just as sure as the Lord knows how to rescue the godly, he's going to keep the ungodly under punishment until judgment day. That's what Peter is saying. And so
and in the same way, the angels are being held, right? So verse 4 says the angels are being held in pits of despair. And this is Enochic. This is from First Enoch. This is bringing in imagery from that. And in First Enoch, that we have angels that are perfectly conscious, and they're being held in chains, and they're awaiting judgment. And basically, 2 Peter here is saying that in the same way, the unrighteous are being held under punishment until the day of judgment.
Yeah.
And James, one of our opponents, he actually says that we should check the NET translation. He might say, we're reading a biased translation here. This is the NASB. The NET translates it a little bit differently. So let's look at the NET, and just for our buddy James here, and see why we don't find that convincing at all. So specifically, it's going to be verse 9 here. He reserves the unrighteousness for punishment at the day of judgment. So you see, Steve, there's a problem with our interpretation here, because they're not held under punishment, they're held for punishment. But with the NET, this is why I love the NET, there's always footnotes. So AG is the footnote here. Let's go down and let's look at the AG footnote so that we can see what's going on here. Verse 9. They have so many footnotes. Okay. AG, okay. Or AG right here. Okay. The adverbial participle can refer either to contemporaneous time or subsequent time. So what he's saying is they can either be under punishment right now, contemporaneous with right now, or subsequent at a later time. So the NET essentially is letting you know that the punishment either could be translated as right now, as the NASB translates it, or it could be translated as the way that the NET did. So the NET made a translation decision. They said, okay, we have 2 options here, and we went with this one. The NASB went with the opposite interpretation and the opposite option. And I think the NASB was correct, because the NASB is recognizing the entire passage. Because as we just showed you, verse 4 through verse 9 is a complete thought. And so just as according to the Enochic literature, the angels are being locked up and held in chains right now in contemporaneous time with when Peter was writing that, in the same way, they are being held under punishment. Okay. And so he's linking these two things together. So yeah, so that's our argument, is like, even if we go to the NET, we can see that our translation is a possible understanding, and we're arguing for why that translation should be preferred.
Yeah, it's more consistent with the context. It's more consistent with the Enochian language that's being referenced. Then Jude also supports that, and then, as we'll later show, like Isaiah also supports it. We didn't bring it up in the debate, but it's definitely supports our case here for understanding 2 Peter 2:9.
So while we're talking about it, why don't we go ahead and pull up Enoch really quick, just so that people can see what we're talking about? Yeah. Because I think this is really important here. So let me view the slideshow so it's a little bigger. All right, it says, "And the Lord said unto Michael, Go bind Semyaza and his associates, who have united themselves with women, so they have defiled themselves with them in all their uncleanness. And when their sons have slain one another, and they have seen the destruction of their beloved ones, bind them fast for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth, till the day of their judgment and of their consummation, till the judgment that is forever and ever is consummated. In those days they shall be let off to the abyss of fire, to the torment and the prison in which they shall be confined forever. And whosoever shall be condemned and destroyed will from thenceforth be bound together with them to the end of all generations." So see that? Whosoever shall be condemned and destroyed will be bound together with them. Okay, so it's even saying like the ungodly are going to be with the angels. This is the exact argument that 2 Peter's making. And so that's kind of what we're saying is 2 Peter is literally just bringing in First Enoch imagery and saying, yeah, this is what's happening.
Right. And then if we go to Jude, he uses the exact same wording and ideas, and it's until Judgment Day, or forever, but that's unto the age. And Jesus defined that in Matthew 13 as
what verse is it in Jude again?
Jude 6. So Jude 6 is describing how angels will be punished until Judgment Day, and then we'll read verses 12 to 13, and it describes how the ungodly will be punished until Judgment Day.
All right, so here's verse 6, if you want to read that.
"You also know that the angels who did not keep within their proper domain, but abandoned their own place of residence, he has kept in eternal chains in utter darkness, locked up for the judgment of the great day." So they're bound in chains, in darkness. So darkness is also a synonym for Sheol or Hades, the realm of the dead.
You said 12 and 13, right?
Yeah. So okay. Verse 6 was saying that the fallen angels, they're going to be in the realm of the dead, bound until Judgment Day. So now we're going to read verse 12 to 13. "These men," and so this is men now, not angels. So these men are dangerous reefs, so ungodly, at your love feast, feasting without reverence, feeding only themselves. They are waterless clouds carried along by the winds, autumn trees without fruit, twice dead, uprooted, wild sea waves spewing out the foam of their shame, wayward stars for whom the utter depths of eternal darkness have been reserved. So we have eternal chains in verse 6, eternal darkness in verse 13, and so it's this there. That's where they are now, and so since that's where they are now, it's where they are now until Judgment Day. And then
they have reserved eternal darkness for them. So in the future, that's where the eternal darkness comes in. But for right now, they're in these chains, right?
Well, no, I believe the eternal darkness is now also, because that same language is used to describe the current state of the fallen angels also.
Oh, gotcha. And I also wonder what the NASB says on this. I always like to consult multiple translations. So let me see what NASB says at verse 12 and 13. Why is it doing this? It's like glitching. Okay. So these are the ones who are hidden reefs in their love feasts, and they feast without fear, like shepherds caring only for themselves, clouds without water, carried along by winds, autumn trees without fruit, doubly dead, uprooted, wild waves of the sea, churning up their own shameful deeds like dirty foam, wandering stars for whom the gloom of darkness has been reserved forever. So that's pretty similar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Like so we don't have a translational difference between these two this time.
That word forever and is the same word for eternal in the NET. That's ionos, and it's unto the age. And so, as I was saying about Matthew 13, when Jesus describes what it's going to be like when the wheat and tares are going to be gathered at the end of the age, he uses ionos. So it's forever, like until the end of time, so to speak. It's not for eternity. So two completely different ideas. And so basically both the fallen angels and the ungodly, they're reserved in ionos chains or ionos darkness. So forever darkness until judgment day. And if we go back to 2 Peter 2:17, it describes how the ungodly are currently being punished. And as all four of us in the debate are annihilationists or conditional, we affirm conditional immortality. There has to be. We don't believe this is what happens to the ungodly after Judgment Day. So this can't be describing a post-Judgment Day punishment. These are springs without water, mist driven by a storm, for whom the black darkness has been reserved. Again, that same language is describing the fallen angels now, prior to Judgment Day. That's what they're experiencing now, prior to Judgment Day. That's what 2 Peter 2:4 and Jude 6 that use the same language, describing the ungodly now.
Yeah, so I think that, in my opinion, let me remove this from the stage real quick. In my opinion, I think this totally refutes their idea that judgment of any kind does not happen before the second return of Jesus. But there's even more, because you also pointed out Isaiah 24, right? So we'll get into that in a moment, but let's take a moment while I'm pulling this up to comment on the very fact that they're saying, on our view, there's judgment before the second coming of Jesus. And on their view, there's no judgment before the second coming of Jesus. Which view aligns with the Bible and which view doesn't? That's the question.
There's more than one definition for judgment. And so like what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah, that was God's judgment, but it's not Judgment Day. So that kind of judgment.
All right, I've got it pulled up here. So this is Isaiah 24, verses 21 through 23. So if you want to read through that.
Right. So it will happen on that day that the Lord will punish the rebellious angels of heaven on high and the kings of the earth on earth. They will be gathered together like prisoners in the dungeon and will be confined in prison. And after many days, they will be punished. Then the moon will be ashamed and the sun be put to shame. For the Lord of armies will reign on Mount Zion in Jerusalem, and his glory will be before his elders. Okay, so when verse 21 says that the Lord will punish the rebellious angels, and then when it says in verse 22, when it says, and after many days they will be punished, I believe that's describing the same punishment. And that punishment is what Jesus described in Matthew 24 or 25:41. Which is the eternal fire or lake of fire, Gehenna. And that's the punishment. And so until that punishment, both the fallen angels and the ungodly will be gathered together like prisoners in the dungeon. And so right here we have Isaiah linking the punishment that the ungodly are currently experiencing while dead to be compared to the fallen angels. Now, according to Chris and James, both the ungodly and the righteous, they're currently experiencing the same experience within the realm of the dead, which is non-existence. There is no consciousness at all. And so if we follow that logic, that would mean that the righteous right now are experiencing a punishment comparable to fallen angels. And that is very problematic, because this verse here is comparing the punishment of the ungodly with fallen angels, and so did 2 Peter, and so did Jude. And so if we want to keep following that logic, that puts our opponents in a very awkward position where they have to try to wrestle with the idea that God punishes the righteous after they die in a similar way that he punishes fallen angels.
Mm-hmm. And the Bible's pretty consistent how fallen angels are being punished. They're being held in chains until the day of judgment, where they're cast into the lake of fire and eventually annihilated. So I think, I don't know, like I said, I think a lot of this stuff is very clear. It's teaching that, yes, they are under punishment. And I think to take verses like Ecclesiastes and Psalms and saying, well, these verses say that, they know nothing and all this stuff in poetic languages, which we will respond to in other videos. We have plans to do other videos on these topics. We're just wanting to focus on punishment before the second coming in this video. To take those verses and to interpret these in light of them, I think is backwards. I think we should take these clear didactic teachings, 2 Peter, Jude, and even this one in Isaiah as well, and interpret Ecclesiastes and Psalms in light of those.
Absolutely.
So, Steve, is there anything else you want to, comment on or say before we sign off here?
Yeah, I would like to go over my rules just real quick, just to kind of explain how my hermeneutical approach works. Okay. So here are the 10 rules I use in my book to come to conclusions here. So first, I start with the presupposition that Jesus never taught false doctrine, and he's a reliable source for our doctrine. And so basically what I mean by that, and what I mean by Jesus's teachings are to be the foundation all other teachings within the Bible are built upon, is it's the idea that if we find ourselves interpreting prophecy or poetry literally, and then that interpretation requires us to dismiss or correct the doctrines that Jesus taught, then it means we're backwards in our approach. We start with taking what Jesus taught as absolute. We like I said, we start with the presupposition that he didn't teach false doctrines. So if we were to only have Jesus's teachings, we should assume that if all that's all we had, we wouldn't be, we wouldn't come away with the opposite of what the Bible teaches. When we take all things in consideration, and when we take all 10 of the rules into consideration. And so when it comes to prophetic dreams and visions, I in poetry, I use the same hermeneutic. And so rules 3 and 4, they apply to dreams and visions, but they can also apply to poetry and wisdom literature. And so rule 3 is prophetic dreams and visions in the Bible must be interpreted through the didactic teachings within the Gospels and epistles. So the teachings that Jesus and the apostles made, those are our foundation. So the verses that we brought up in 2 Peter and Jude, those are the clearest that we have of punishment of the ungodly that takes place between their death and judgment day. And then the fourth rule is dreams and visions can be interpreted as literal if the same concept is taught within a didactic teaching. And so therefore, like, we could take what was clearly taught in Jude 2 or 2 Peter 2 and Jude 3 or Jude, and we can take those literal and didactic teachings, and we can interpret things like the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, when it describes the rich man being punished, That it's describing between his death and judgment day. He's in flames. He's in torment. So that's a consistent imagery with what we have with the fallen angels. And, that originates all the way back to the book of Numbers in the sons of Korah, where it describes the earth opening up and them being going alive into the flames of Sheol. And so I believe that Jesus was actually, even when he was describing the rich man in flames, it's a callback to, the sons of Korah. Like, I don't think that imagery is an accident on Jesus's part. I believe it's intentional. And there, I'll go through it in another video, but Jesus, throughout the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, he uses Old Testament imagery of the realm of the dead multiple times. And so it's not like the flames in Hades, which is the Greek word for Sheol. I don't think I don't think it went over his head that that there was a connection there with Sheol and Hades and flames and the sons of Korah. But yeah, so basically,
does this also help us with interpreting Isaiah 14 like 2 Peter and Jude? So like, because Chris and James might want to say, oh, well, you guys just used Isaiah 14, which is more prophetic and poetic, and so you guys are reading your interpretation into that. So are you basically trying to say like, no, 2 Peter and Jude are the foundation, and then since Isaiah 14 matches what those say, then we can read it literally?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so Chris and James, that's just to I guess anticipate a objection from you guys if you watch this. So yeah, I think all that is I would agree with all that you said so far. Like, the clear didactic teachings need to be what we understand everything through, and then if a poetic passage matches the imagery and matches the teaching, then we can just read it straightforwardly because it's taught clearly elsewhere. I think that just makes perfect sense to me. So
yeah.
All right. Well, before we sign off, do you have any parting words for the people?
Just stay tuned. This is just the first video of many of our response videos that of the debate. There's probably at least a half a dozen that we have planned, but yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I'm excited. I do want to say, if Chris and James, if you guys watch this, I enjoyed the debate. I thought it was a lot of fun. I've watched Chris's content for years, so it was a lot of fun to be able to do that. And yeah, I definitely think that we are right on this issue. Obviously, that's why I was on this side of the debate, and I think you guys are wrong. So yeah, I hope that we can have further discussions in the future. And I know that we were even possibly planning on all four getting together and doing a video together, so that'll be fun. But in the meantime, we've got some responses lined up for you guys, and we're going to give our thoughts. And yeah, stick around, stay tuned for all that. Do all the YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, and we're going to post these on both channels. So if you're watching this on my channel, go subscribe to his channel. If you're watching this on his channel, hey, come check out the Epitome, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
God bless.